And so today, first off, I want to say this. It was a very, very big day in court. If you haven't heard, many of you might have heard. So stick with me because a very big day. And we picked back up with Detective Olson's direct examination. If you remember, Detective Bobby Olson was on the stand, and she continues to be on the stand today. And once again, Exhibit 60 was front and center. James Craig's handwritten timeline. It's a fascinating piece of evidence, really. James Craig's own handwritten timeline of what he says happened. And so we continue. So according to this timeline, you ready for this? According to James and this handwritten timeline, Angela, his wife, told him that she was planning to ingest eye drops and then take cyanide. He wrote in this handwritten timeline that she specifically asked for it in capsule form with a syringe of potassium cyanide mixed in water as a backup plan, just in case the pills didn't work. He went on to say that he filled capsules by using the clindamycin prescription he called in for her sinus infection. He claimed that at her request, he filled a dozen of them with 300 milligrams of cyanide each. He held back 4 capsules that he knew were clean and gave her those ones first on March 14th. So he was essentially trying to paint this picture where Angela was not only aware of the cyanide, but that she requested it and that she wanted it. I mean, you can't make this up. James wrote this all out on March 16th. But at that point, he no longer had access to his home because that same day, investigators searched the house and actually photographed the bottle of clindamycin. But at that time, they had no idea that those pills might be tainted. It wasn't until later, after reading James's timeline, that they realized that medication might be key evidence. Investigators went back to the house on March 21st to retrieve the bottle, but by that point, James had been allowed back in his home and the pills were already gone. Of course they were. Of course they were. So even that search of the house, they did not take that prescription bottle of clindamycin. It's so unfortunate. James also admitted in the timeline to preparing a syringe of cyanide. Admitted to preparing it. He said that Angela drank eye drops that morning, after which she then became lethargic. And then at around 10 a.m., Angela's brother Mark gave her a dose of the antibiotics, the clindamycin. James claimed those must have been the tainted ones, the capsules filled with the cyanide. But Detective Olson reminded the court that Mark specifically said that James was the one who insisted he give Angela the pills. It was James saying, "Give my wife these pills for her sinus infection." The pink top shaker bottle Angela had been using also tested positive for tetratrihazolate, which is the active ingredient in eye drops, in Visine. And when Angela was taken to the ER, it briefly seemed like she was starting to do a little better. But then, in a moment when no one else was supposedly within earshot, James claimed that she asked him to help her finish the job. Asked his wife to finish the job. That's, again, what he wrote in the timeline. And he said the conversation happened, again, after Angela's brother Mark had left the hospital. But records and surveillance show that James had already left the hospital once that day, had gone home and came back. And when he returned, Mark was still there, which means the very first time James was ever truly alone with Angela was after he had already made that trip home to retrieve the syringe. So if Angela was never alone with James before that point, when exactly could she have asked him for helping finish the job? Mark was with her the entire time. Still, James claims that he refused to administer the syringe. He said he had handed it to her, turned his back, and then heard her complaining of arm pain. I mean, this really, you can't make this up. And when he turned around, the syringe was supposedly lying next to her IV. He says he quietly pocketed it, told a nurse about the arm pain, and then added, "That must have done the trick because I don't think she ever regained consciousness." He also tried to make it clear in his writing that yes, he had prepared all of the concoction, but insisted he never forced her to take anything. He claimed, "I did not trick her or force her into taking anything," end quote. In his timeline, James also claimed that Angela may have miscalculated the doses, but in that very same timeline, he admits that he's the one who prepared them. So which is it? If he measured them out, how could she be the one who got it wrong? He repeatedly tried to frame her death as an intentional suicide, but investigators came to a very different conclusion. And maybe more importantly, so did Angela's daughters. They were adamant that their mother was not ever going to self-harm. Also, Olsen said that in the timeline, James never once mentioned that so-called game of chicken. He later described to the Redfern that game of chicken, that detail was completely absent. And he definitely didn't write anything about Angela trying to set him up. But then, in a letter to a man named William Walden on page 3, James said that he wanted someone to testify that Angela was setting him up. It's a total shift in the story. The prosecution pointed out that nothing in Exhibit 60, the timeline, backed up that claim. When the defense objected, the judge reminded the court that for the jury to decide by comparing the documents themselves. The state then refocused back on James's own words in another letter, Exhibit 74. He wrote, quote, "I sincerely believe she made a calculation mistake and accidentally killed herself," end quote. So now it's an accident? He constantly flip-flops back and forth between an intentional suicide, an accidental miscalculation, or a setup, but never that it could possibly have been his fault. No, any option but that. And next, the state brought up someone named Roderick Crittenden, who also went by the alias Roger. And I get this, Detective Olsen said that she interviewed him. But as soon as his name was mentioned, Roderick's name was mentioned, the defense objected, and fast. The attorneys approached the bench, and that led to a 15-minute sidebar. When court resumed, the prosecutor shifted the focus right back to James's writings, letters, and texts. They began drawing direct comparisons between what James claimed in Exhibit 60 and what he said in his later statements, especially about Angela's intentions and how she died. And then Exhibits 185 through 193 were admitted. This was a detailed document showing James's internet searches, purchases, and even a breakdown of Angela's symptoms. The list was zoomed in and shown to the jury. The defense objected again, but after another 10-minute sidebar, the exhibits were officially entered into evidence. There were also texts from James to Detective Olsen. She testified that she seized his phone on March 16th, but not long after that, he started communicating again, this time using a different device. And right as the messages came in, defense attorney Moses quickly asked to approach the bench again. After another brief sidebar, the state said that they had no further questions. And during cross-examination, the defense brought up the public release of James's arrest affidavit. Olsen then they pressed Olsen about how much information was shared with the media early on, and she agreed. The case was all over the news after his arrest. I remember it well. The affidavit was packed with details about the allegations, and those details were quickly widespread. But Olsen explained that in most cases, law enforcement does try to keep information as close to the vest as possible. And that way, when people come forward with tips, they're not just repeating what they heard in the news. They're giving fresh, credible leads that haven't been influenced by media coverage, and law enforcement can assess what are actually tips and what might be things influenced by the media. But in this case, that wasn't really an option, because once the affidavit went public, the lid was off. That included inside the jail. Olsen said that by the time she spoke with Casey Bohannon, the inmate who met James in the medical unit, other inmates were already talking about the case. They were all referring to him as the dentist. Yes, the infamous dentist. The implications being that inmates might have been motivated to come forward with information based on what they heard in the news. But Olsen pushed back on that idea. She said that Casey shared details that weren't in the affidavit at all, like James's lifted Ford truck, the security codes, and locations of the home security cameras. That suggested that this knowledge came from personal conversations with James and not just from reading the headlines. Detective Olsen also testified about the surveillance setup at the Gregg home. She said there was a camera mounted outside the front door that had a clear view of the street. If a truck or really any vehicle had been parked out front, it likely would have been captured on that camera. And then things shifted towards James's personal relationships, and they were messy. We know this. Messy is an understatement. After Olson seized his phone, she began uncovering his contact with multiple women, not one, not two, not three. There were 4 central figures. Jordan Ivy, who had been in contact with James from October 2023 to January 2024. Carrie Igseth from December to February. Elizabeth Gore from December to March. And then, of course, Karen King from February to March. Now, all 4 women were involved during overlapping timeframes. And that's just the women the state focused on in court. So they were a giant Venn diagram, overlapping one another in their relationships with James. There were others who didn't testify, including one named Michelle Pope. The defense then moved on to Angela's journal. Olson clarified that Angela's sisters actually found it inside a storage unit. This is sad. She said that she never requested a search of that storage unit because it had been rented after James was already arrested. But according to the family, it was being used to store important items as they cleaned out the house to prepare it for sale. And the defense then admitted Exhibit AAA, while Detective Olson had only been sent photocopies of the journal. This was the original journal that they brought out, Angela's journal. Moses asked Olson to flip to an early entry from January 9th, 2009. And guys, this was sad to hear read. January 9th, 2009, Moses reads Angela's words aloud. It said, quote, "I feel so lost and so alone. The further in this process we get, I find it harder to forgive. I feel sick and it's getting worse. I looked at Jim today and I don't feel any love. I feel abused." She felt abused. I want to emphasize that. Worthless and unloved. Where do I find myself? Where and how do I find my marriage again? My mom said I look thin, nagging me to eat, but I can't. All I ever wanted was for people to like me and love me. End quote. That is, I'm so sorry, Angela, that you felt those things. That's not your fault. And then she referenced an entry from January 13th, 2009. Defense attorney Moses described it as Angela's religious feelings related to Jim. It said, quote, "Satan cannot have me. I'm trying to find ways to be positive every day. He will not destroy me with hopelessness and self-doubt," end quote. And then Angela listed off Satan's lies. Quote, "How can Jim do this to me if he really loves me? He must hate me. He must want to be with someone else," end quote. And then on January 20th, 2009, it read, quote, "I felt really sad today. All the books I've ever read said that I have to go through mourning. I feel depressed and a huge sense of loss with no hope. I look back and think the good times were a lie. He was a lie. I've lost my sense of security. We have a long road ahead of us because of what he did. I need to stay out of his email today. Maybe if I can do that, we can build trust again. But I don't know if I am ready to do that," end quote. And next, Moses said that in 2018, the journal makes it clear that Angela found out that James was having an affair for 6 months. Between February and March of 2018, Angie wrote about marriage struggles. On March 7th, 2018, she wrote, "Jim met with his new addiction counselor last night. It went so well. He's learning about his addiction and how to be in recovery." End quote. Moses said that it seemed like Angela was feeling hopeful in this section, that James was finally getting help, and Olson agreed. Later, entries in Angela's journal reveal even more heartbreak as she came to terms with his affairs. She wrote, "He loved her? Did he hold her hand and talk to her about everything? Or was it all just about sex? Did he hold her and look at her like she was magical? Did he buy her gifts? Did he send her flowers? What was so amazing about her that he didn't want to give up? It almost killed me when he said he didn't love me, that I wasn't enough," end quote. And in an April 2018 entry, Angela described beginning therapy on her own. She also wrote, quote, "All I want to do when that happens is crawl into bed and cry myself to sleep. I haven't figured out yet if I should give in or push through," end quote. Detective Bobby Olson on the stand confirmed that in 2018, James Craig was actively having affairs. Moses noted that through Angela's writings, we can see the depth of pain she experienced as she learned the truth. And yet, the couple stayed together again and again. It became a painful cycle: betrayal, heartbreak, reconciliation. But Olsen also confirmed that over the years, Angela and James had ongoing conversations about divorce. They would go back and forth debating whether to separate, who wanted out, and what the future would look like. Ultimately, Olsen explained that in Colorado, only one person has to declare the marriage irrevocably broken in order to file for divorce. And despite everything, that final step was never taken. It's clear now, let's lay this out, what the defense is trying to do. The defense is trying to paint a picture of Angela as deeply depressed, suggesting that the long-standing struggles in her marriage may have pushed her to a breaking point. But while Angela poured her heart onto the pages of her journal, never once did she say that she was suicidal. And I also want to point out just how upsetting it is at what the defense is doing. They are reading Angela's journal, saying, it is clear that James was abusive. It is clear that Angela felt abused. It is clear that Angela was depressed because of her husband. It is clear that Angela is reacting to this man's abuse. And thus, think about it. It is clear that Angela is at fault for her death. It's so twisty to me and so upsetting. And while Angela poured her heart out onto the pages of her journal, again, she never once said that she wanted to self-harm, not once. She simply said she was an abused woman, and we see it. Her diary was where she shared her most private, painful thoughts. And if there had even been a hint that she wanted to end her life, that's something the defense would have undoubtedly read aloud. But there was nothing like that, not once. What we do see is a woman who was heartbroken, a woman who was trying to make sense of betrayal, a woman who admitted she was struggling, but also someone who kept showing up, kept pushing through, and still wanted to fight for her marriage and return to this man that I will call an abuser. She was an abused woman. And Angela may have been sad, even depressed, and understandably so, but she never said she wanted to hurt herself. And next, the defense moved on to Exhibit 59, a text message James sent to Ryan Redfern, their friend Ryan Redfern, partner to the dental practice. Olsen said that this message was recovered before investigators obtained James's phone. Moses read some of the messages aloud. Good morning, Ryan. Thank you for taking my patient load today. And this one has been read in court before. So let's hear it one more time. Quote, good morning, Ryan. Thank you for taking my patient load today. I want to make an urgent plea to you. If we were ever friends, please do this favor for me. Please don't talk to anyone about what we talked about last night, including any law enforcement officers. You are under no obligation to answer their questions unless you are served a subpoena, and you will do more damage than good to my family by continuing to insert yourself into this. Angela is gone, and I am devastated. There is nothing that can bring her back, and I want desperately to tell you all of the details so that you can better understand what's gone on behind the scenes with her. There is so much that you don't know that I wish you did. Yesterday, I had to tell my children that their mother was not going to wake up and they were there to say their final goodbyes. The hospital said we could bring the kids up to say goodbye at 6:45, but because of the investigation you opened with your incomplete information, the hospital made those poor, grieving, hysterical kids wait until 10 o'clock to see their mom. After an hour or so of saying goodbye to her, we went home just before midnight, only to have our house sealed against our entry by the police. And instead of getting to go home and find comfort, they were met with flashing lights and cold, unfeeling cops, and the kids, scared and confused, had to go to sleep at the home of a ward member. Family is starting to come into town today, and I have to tell them they can't come to my house, end quote. Olsen confirmed that parts of the message were true. She testified that the children were brought to the hospital where doctors told them the devastating news. Their mother wasn't going to wake up. Angela was not going to survive to see her 6 children again. And then they did have to wait several hours before they were allowed to see her. And when they returned home, their house was sealed off as part of the investigation. Instead of being able to grieve in their own space, James told Ryan that they had to stay at home at a ward member. That is a person from their congregation, and even extended family wasn't allowed inside their home. According to Olson, no one had informed James beforehand that he wouldn't be able to return home that night. But law enforcement had the legal authority to secure a potential crime scene, whether it's a home or building or any premises, while they await a search warrant. While officers aren't allowed to enter until that warrant is granted, they are allowed to prevent anyone else from going in to preserve the integrity of the scene. So Detective Olson testified that on March 15th, Detective Moreno drafted the search warrant for the Craig residence. But before executing the search of the home, investigators went to the ward member's house where James was staying. They knocked on the door and informed him that there was a warrant for Angela's phone as well as James's phone. And James handed over both devices, both his and Angela's cell phones, and voluntarily provided their passwords. Olson pointed out that he was not legally required to give up his passwords for either the phones or his laptop, but he chose to do so. And Olson then explained that before searching the house, investigators had already begun speaking with multiple individuals connected to the case. So investigators, as I was saying, had already begun speaking with multiple individuals connected to the case. The goal was to gather fresh information from potential witnesses before entering the home, ensuring that any evidence they uncovered would be backed by firsthand accounts and context. And next, jurors were shown another photo taken during the search of the Craig home on March 16th. This one showing Angela's nightstand. And on that nightstand, as we have learned in previous days in court, was a shaker bottle that had been tested and confirmed to contain tetrahydrozoline. Detective Olson confirmed that she was aware James had returned home from the hospital around midday on March 15th. She also noticed that a bottle of clindamycin, the antibiotic James had insisted Angela take, was found on that same nightstand. According to his timeline, James went home to get more poison at Angie's request. But Moses pointed out that while he was there, he made no attempt to clean up the scene. The shaker bottle was left right there, as well as the prescription bottle. He didn't try to hide or dispose any of it. And it's a good point. I wondered why too. Moses then asked Olson about the protocol following a home search. Is law enforcement required to immediately release a residence after conducting a search? Olson said no. She explained that she was not obligated to declare the search complete right away and could have kept the house secured under police authority for at least 14 days. She admitted that the house was filled with potential evidence, medicine, protein powders, electronics, papers, drawers to search through, and investigators could have kept the home locked down for days. But ultimately, Olson made the decision to release the home just hours after the search. Jurors were next shown a photo of the music room inside the Craig home. Visible in the images were several laptops, which Olson identified as family laptops, none of which were seized. She admitted that she does not know what was on those devices. It's hard to know that were left behind, yes. Elsewhere in the house, additional electronics were also left behind. On a desk in the primary bedroom, there was another laptop or tablet that was also not taken into evidence. And Olson confirmed she had no knowledge of its contents. It's frustrating. In the master bathroom, an iPad was found, but not seized. Again, its contents remain unknown to this day. It's hard to hear. And a photo of Angela in her hospital room showed a laptop beside her, which was also not collected, and Olson testified she does not know what was stored on that device either. The defense is arguing that although the state and Detective Olson claim that there's no evidence Angela ever searched for poisons or showed signs of being suicidal, none of these devices, besides Angela's phones, were ever searched or analyzed. Renee Prey even testified that Angela asked for her laptop to do research. This means that any potential evidence on her tablet or laptop was never reviewed, leaving a significant gap in the investigation and raising questions about the completeness of the state's case, of the state's evidence. What else is out there that they missed? And additionally, other water bottles found throughout the home were not tested. In a drawer in the master bathroom, investigators located syringes along with medications meant to be administered via syringe. Olson said the medications included epinephrine, typically used for an allergic reaction, along with other unidentified substances. However, none of these items were taken in as evidence. On March 22nd, investigators executed a second search warrant, this time specifically looking for a bottle of clindamycin. Detective Olson testified that despite their efforts, they did not find it. Prosecutor Moses then presented the evidence log, a list of seized items from the home. And so item number 8 was listed as a bottle of clindamycin. However, Olson clarified that the one they recovered was an older bottle from 2019. Moses pointed out that the list doesn't indicate the prescription date, and Olson agreed, acknowledging that the inventory lacked that important detail. And next, jurors were shown a photo of the kitchen where a camera had been installed. Olson confirmed that they were able to obtain both video and audio footage from this device. Moses noted that opening cabinets would block the view of the camera, and Olson agreed. She also confirmed that James was aware the camera was there and never attempted to block or disable it. Moses continued, quote, "We saw footage of James microwaving something, right?" And then Olson replied, "Yes." Well, Moses then asked, "Arsenic is a metal, correct? Can you explain what happens when you microwave metal?" And before Olson could respond, the state objected on grounds of speculation, and the objection was sustained. But that's a good point. If you recall, yesterday the state tried to show that James retrieved the package of arsenic out of the mailbox and soon after was seen microwaving and mixing something in the kitchen. And since Olson wasn't able to answer out of curiosity, I did look up what happens if you microwave arsenic. And it turns out it can actually cause a fire or even an explosion. But nonetheless, it is possible that James just microwaved some liquid first and then added the arsenic afterward to dissolve it. We don't know for sure exactly how it went down. But it was interesting for sure. An interesting move by the defense. And the next exhibit was a photo of the kitchen cabinets directly beneath the camera. Detective Olson testified that nothing from those cabinets was seized or taken into evidence. No cyanide, arsenic, or tetrahydrozoline was found there. Investigators also did not find any empty bottles of eye drops in the trash. Olson then confirmed that a search was conducted on James's work laptop. The defense pointed out that there were some search results from March 9th that the state chose not to share. And these included, are you ready? First one, what does it mean when the systolic and diastolic are close together? Number 2, how to raise blood pressure. Next one, is low blood pressure dangerous? What to know about blood pressure. Also noted that this aligned with the time when Angela was experiencing low blood pressure. So was James searching these things to try to help her? The state objected to these searches and it was sustained. Good job, Judge. Clearly, I'm pro-prosecution in this case. I think we know that. But Moses then circled back. Still, I like a good defense. A good defense is so important. And Moses then circled back to March 6th, referencing additional searches conducted on James's work laptop. That day, James searched for causes of blurry vision, all about vision, eyes moving slow, weak symptoms. These searches appeared to coincide with the period when Angela was experiencing these symptoms. Moses also highlighted a March 1st search, Ryan Hate Act online pharmacy. So this act is a federal law that restricts the sale of controlled substances over the internet. It specifically states that a doctor or psychologist cannot prescribe controlled substances without first seeing a patient in person. And with that, court took its lunch break. So after lunch, Detective Bobby Olson back on the stand. First, she confirmed that besides journal AAA, there was not another journal, meaning that they had nothing past 2018. Nothing. And after that was when the defense brought up defendant's exhibits, GGG and HHH, both tied to the computer from Summerbrook Dental. The defense asked her about exhibit GGG, which was body-worn camera footage showing the police accessing the computer. And Olson confirmed that the footage shows the moment law enforcement unlocked the computer and began going through the content. Now, There is no sound on the footage. It had been muted, but the video clearly shows the forensic tech navigating the computer. The defense then turned to Exhibit HHH, a still image of the Google homepage, and Detective Bobby Olson testified that when they opened the browser and clicked the icon in the top right corner, the little familiar profile J, it revealed the account signed in as Jim Craig, or Jim and Waffle. So while Detective Harris said that the computer opened right up to that screen, Detective Olson explained the computer itself was initially locked under a Summerbrook dental staff login. But once they got in and they opened the Google history, the browser and history were still active under James Craig's personal account. Detective Bobby Olson walked the jury through what they were seeing in body-worn camera footage, entered as Exhibit GGG. And what the footage showed was officers scrolling through different screens on the exam room computer, including the lock screen labeled for Summerbrook Dental office staff, before finally landing on the Google browser, which was already open and logged in. James was making this easy. Olson confirmed the computer itself had been seized on March 16th, but the search captured on video did not happen until March 17th. And then the defense shifted gears. Attorney Lisa Moses began pressing Olson about who could have accessed the computer in the days leading up to the seizure. She asked whether the dental office had been open during the critical windows, March 7th through 10th and March 13th through 16th. Olson could not say. She testified that she wasn't aware of Summerbrook's daily schedule. And when asked who might have had the access to the computers from March 9th to the 16th, Olson said that, to her knowledge, all staff members had access. And then Moses pivoted again, this time to text messages and hospital footage. Olson confirmed she remembered Mark Gray's testimony and that she'd reviewed a selected extraction of messages between Mark and James Craig. Then came a new line of questioning: hospital surveillance. Olson testified that she had seen video footage of James arriving at the hospital around 11 or 11:30 a.m. and then leaving shortly after. From there, he returned home. According to what Olson had seen when James got home, both the shaker bottle and the pill bottle were still exactly where they'd been left. On the way home from the hospital that same day, James had texted Mark and Renee asking if they wanted food. Mark responded, starving, and sent back a funny, hangry emoji. It seemed casual, normal. No one was worried why it was taking so long or what was going on. And then Moses went back into the hospital surveillance cameras. Olson confirmed that most of the footage came from a camera positioned to look across the nurse's station directly outside Angela's room. And in the footage, you can see James, Mark, and others coming and going, often heading down a hallway that Olson described as a dead end or leading to a left side exit. And this was a big thing with the state, saying, look, this is a big deal on Friday, that he went down a dead end where there was a syringe, a sharps container. So Moses focused in on that. That hallway, though, wasn't just a dead end and nothing more. It was a route that James, Mark, and Renee consistently used during their visits. Detective Bobby Olson continued on the stand, and the defense wasn't done with her yet. Lisa Moses brought up a detail from earlier testimony: a sharps container, again located at the end of the hallway outside Angela's hospital room. Olson confirmed that yes, she had testified to its presence. But did she search it? Did she search the sharps container? What was the answer? No. Olson said that while law enforcement discussed searching it, they ultimately didn't due to biohazard risks, and critically, because the lab would not accept evidence pulled from that type of disposal bin. When asked if she searched the smaller sharps container inside Angela's room, her answer was the same: no. For the same reason, the lab would not process content from a used biohazard container. And then the defense shifted once again, this time to home surveillance footage. Exhibit 75 was introduced, a collection of selected video clips from the Craig home. Olson testified that police set up a body-worn camera to record the surveillance screen inside the home, specifically the camera that overlooked the kitchen. And to keep the footage playing, they had to keep the screen active. So they used a mouse jiggler, a device that moves the mouse cursor automatically to prevent the computer from falling asleep. Now, if you notice a little arrow dancing across the screen in the footage, That's why Moses pointed out that in some clips you can hear what sounds like background noise. She asked Olson where that came from, and Olson replied it could be background noise from the body camera itself, or possibly people outside the interview room, which was located next to the waiting area. And then there was the beeping. Every couple of minutes, viewers hear 2 consecutive beeps. That sound, it's the body-worn camera's built-in signal. Olson confirmed it beeps or vibrates, depending on the settings, every 2 minutes to alert the officer that the device is still actively recording. A small sound, but in this case, part of the digital breadcrumbs being picked over in a courtroom built on tiny details. Everything matters. And before the next batch of exhibits was admitted, defense attorney Lisa Moses confirmed a key detail with Detective Bobby Olson. There were gaps in the home surveillance footage, including a 12-minute gap on March 7th during a big conversation that James and Angela had. Moments when the kitchen camera had simply stopped recording. With that clarification on record, Moses introduced a long series of screenshots taken from the Craig family's kitchen surveillance cameras, exhibits I through Y. These were not crime scene photos. These were quiet snapshots, moments the defense hoped would paint a picture of a loving, connected marriage, even in the days leading up to Angela's death. So here's a breakdown of all of the exhibits. Exhibit I, February 20th, 6:37 a.m. What this shows, James and Angela appear together behind the refrigerator door. Double J, same morning. The two appear physically close, intimate. Double K, James has his hand on Angela's lower back. Double L, February 26th, 2:22 p.m. in the living room. James is bending over near Angela, who's on the couch. Olson noted he would often come home during lunch breaks. And then you have exhibit M and N, February 27th, early morning, described as being loving towards each other. O, described also as being loving towards each other. P, exhibit P, February 28th, James's hand rests on Angela's back at the dining table. Exhibits Q and R, March 5th, James is seen hugging Angela. The two are again described as affectionate. Exhibit SS, more affectionate behavior, no timestamp given. 2 T's and 2 U exhibits, March 6th, 6:30 a.m. James and Angela are seen kissing on the lips. In exhibit VV, March 7th, the two are sitting together on the couch with the computer open in front of them. Olson testified she did not know what computer it was or whether it was used to conduct any searches. The defense's implication is clear, that James Craig was plotting to kill his wife. He was still showing physical affection, sharing daily routines and appearing loving in front of a camera that recorded their home life for weeks on end. And those March 6 clips where they were kissing on the lips, those were taken the same day Angela first became ill. In clip 113, part of exhibit 75, the jury watched a home surveillance video from March 15th, the day Angela Craig was declared brain dead. Prosecutor and detective walked through the footage frame by frame. Do you see the sink? They asked. Yes. Are those dishes in the sink? Yes. Detective Bobby Olson confirmed the timeline. James Craig left the house, went to the hospital, then returned home, and later went back to the hospital again. And after that second visit, he was no longer allowed back into the home until investigators executed a search warrant. And then came exhibit 159, a photo of those same dishes in the sink, front and center. The now familiar pink shaker bottle, Olson continued, nothing from Angela's hospital bedside was moved into that sink. So the implication, that shaker bottle, had been left there before Angela's spinal collapse and never touched again. And then the prosecution briefly shifted gears, addressing a question that often hovers in the background of cases like this: motive. They brought up the life insurance policy. Olson confirmed that both James and Angela had equal policies on each other. So it wasn't just Angela, it was also James. They had equal life insurances on each other. This wasn't a sudden or recently updated plan. And no, James didn't have a significantly larger policy on Angela than what she had on him. The defense turned next to the Craig family finances, trying to dismantle any suggestion that James Craig may have had a financial motive. Detective Bobby Olson continued, the Craigs didn't have a mortgage. Their home was paid in full, $1 million house. Credit cards paid off. Monthly bills paid. Car payments up to date. No signs of repossession or urgent financial strain. No creditors knocking, the defense asked. Not that I'm aware of. But when it came to the IRS, things got a little bit more complicated. Olson interjected, I disagree. There was money owed to the IRS. The defense pushed back, but not bill collectors trying to get bills paid. Olson replied pointedly, I don't know if you think a bill collector is different than the IRS. So, while the day-to-day looked clean on paper, there were cracks beneath the surface. Maybe not bill collectors at the door, but the IRS was definitely on the radar. As Cross continued, the defense pushed hard on what wasn't done during the investigation. Detective Bobby Olson confirmed there was a camera system inside Summerbrook Dental, but no footage was ever pulled. Why? Olson said it was based on Caitlin Romero's word and that officers were unable to locate any device that actually had surveillance capability. And then came questions about Angela's devices. Was the computer next to Angela's bed collected? Olson couldn't confirm whether that specific device was among the ones they had. Was Angela's personal laptop searched? Her personal laptop. You would think it would be, right? No. But no, they had not searched her personal laptop. What about the laptop on the desk? Olson said if it was a laptop, it was not searched. Tablets? One was searched from inside the home. And then the focus turned back to Caitlin Romero, the employee who tipped off investigators about suspicious behavior. Caitlin Romero is an important figure in this case. The defense asked whether detectives had fully vetted the dynamics between Caitlin Romero and her boss, James Craig. Olson said Caitlin had confirmed there was no sexual relationship. Well, did she ever tell you they communicated on another platform? Olson replied, I don't believe she did. And finally, the defense brought up Katie, the employee who received and signed for the package that may have contained poison. Did you ever interview her? Did you ever interview Katie? They asked Detective Bobby Olson. Her answer, no. Did you have her full name? Yes. Uncollected footage, unsearched laptops, uninterviewed witnesses. It was a moment, honestly, that underscored what the defense wants the jury to see, that some questions were asked, but others were never followed up. Defense attorney Lisa Moses continued pressing Detective Bobby Olson, not about what was done, but about what wasn't done. First, she challenged the scope of the search warrants. Olson confirmed that the warrants were limited to activities starting in early February. And at that time, that was all that they were authorized to obtain. But Moses wasn't satisfied. You could have gone back for more, right? You did for the house. You went back for more. Why not the phone? And Olson didn't have a direct answer. Then came another gap in the investigation. Angela's visit to Saddle Rock Urgent Care. Were you aware she went to urgent care? I don't know if we knew which urgent care she went to, she responded. But Moses pointed out that they had Annabelle's credit card records, which showed a charge that same day. And they had spoken to Annabelle, who could have confirmed where she drove Angela that day. And yet Olson confirmed they never requested any urgent care record. No subpoena, no follow-up, no documentation. It was another moment the defense used to suggest that in a case where every detail matters, some were simply missed. Under questioning, Detective Bobby Olson confirmed that on March 6th, Angela Craig went to the Parker Adventist ER. And the very next day, March 7th, she went to urgent care without James. That same day, there was an argument between Angela and James. The defense zeroed in on the other potential blind spot in the investigation, Angela's personal life. Did you gather her therapy records? Detective Bobby Olson responded. I have no knowledge of what therapist she went to, Detective Bobby Olson replied. And then the defense continued. Did you ask any of her friends? I don't believe any of them knew she went to therapy, replied Detective Olson. Then the question shifted to Angela's digital footprint. Did you know how many email accounts Angela had? No. Do you know where her iCloud information was? Her answer, I believe that would have been included in the download of her cell phone. Once again, the defense seemed to be trying to plant the seed. If Angela had been reaching out for help digitally, emotionally, privately, would investigators have even known? Bobby Olson also testified that she did not see any jail videos herself of James following inmate Nathaniel Harris around the jail like a puppy, as he claimed, nor did she pull any records for Angela's cards to King Soopers. And with that, it was time for redirect. But redirect was not, well, redirect, well, you know what? Let's get into redirect. It's important. Let me take a quick sip of water. 3,000 people here in chat. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Please hit like and please subscribe if you value what we have done here for the James Craig trial. Thank you so much for being here. So the redirect was brief, but it was not without a few jolts, to say the least. Prosecutors circled back to the series of affectionate home surveillance photos, exhibits I through Y, asking Detective Bobby Olson if those moments were captured before and after the Las Vegas trip. Olson confirmed yes. And then the prosecutor moved to the timeline bombshell. Wasn't it during that Las Vegas trip that James came home and asked Angela for a divorce before initiating a secret suicide pact? Defense attorney Lisa Moses quickly objected, and then just as quickly withdrew the objection. But by then, the question hung in the air, and Bobby Olson never answered. The prosecution pivoted. This time, the topic turned back to the hospital sharps container and why it was never searched. Olson explained that on March 15th, the day Angela crashed, investigators didn't yet have James Craig's phone. They seized it the following morning, but didn't begin reviewing its contents until March 20th or 21st. By then, Olson said there was no reasonable belief that any viable evidence would still be in that sharps container. Time had passed, and so had opportunity. As redirect wrapped up, the prosecution shifted focus one last time from the hallway sharps container to the one inside Angela's hospital room. Did James Craig ever say he dropped something in there? Detective Bobby Olson was clear, no. He said he put the item in his pocket, not in the sharps container. And then came more questions about what wasn't collected. Why didn't they seize every device from the Craig home? And Olson testified that at the time of the search, investigators didn't believe the other devices would contain relevant evidence. And critically, they hadn't yet reviewed the home surveillance footage. That wasn't collected until March 21st. And with over 1,000 hours of video, it took months to go through. And then came a series of confirmations from Olson, small but important details the prosecution wanted on the record. There was no evidence James moved the shaker bottle or the pill bottle from Angela's nightstand after she went to the hospital. There was no evidence he wiped search history from the computer in exam room 9, infamous exam room 9 at Summerbrook Dental. Angela's personal journal ended in 2018 with blank pages following. The journal did reference deception by James Craig, but there were no mentions of self-harm. In a March 7th, 2018 entry, Angela wrote that James had told her he felt dissatisfied and unhappy, a quiet glimpse into a fractured relationship years before her death. And with no jury questioning, Detective Bobby Olson's testimony concluded. And then came a moment that no one expected. After a quick 15-minute recess, so everyone can go use the restroom and do their thing, the attorneys returned. And the defense, what did they do? They simply rested. No witnesses, no evidence, no rebuttals. They stated plainly, we're holding the state to its burden of proof. And with that, the jury was dismissed for the day. So next up, closing arguments and jury instruction. As soon as the jury stepped out of the courtroom, the judge asked if there was anything to address. The defense wasted no time and said, we're asking the court to dismiss count 4. In fact, they went a step further, requesting a judgment of acquittal on all counts. However, they made it clear that they were resting on the record for every count except count 4, which they actively argued in court. Their core point was, quote, no reasonable juror, based on the evidence presented, would be likely to convict, end quote. They acknowledged the standard that the evidence must be viewed in the light most favorable to the prosecution. But when it came to the solicitation to commit perjury charge, specifically related to a man named William Walborn, they said the case fell flat. The only evidence presented to the jury was Exhibit 43, a handwritten letter allegedly written by James and addressed to Walborn. But that letter was never actually delivered. The address didn't exist, so the letter was returned to sender and searched by jail staff. There's no proof that the two ever actually communicated. No proof that they knew each other or had a single conversation. And without that, the defense argued that the state failed to prove that James actively attempted to persuade Mr. Walborn to commit perjury. Well, the state quickly fired back, arguing that there is evidence to support all 6 counts, including count 4. Just because the letter never made it to William Walborn doesn't mean James didn't attempt to carry out the act. The letter's contents alone, they said, reveal his intent. The state pointed out that Jennifer Harriman, who searched the returned letter, testified about what she found inside once she searched it. And James's own daughter, Angela Craig, identified the handwriting as her father's. Plus, the jury could compare that handwriting to other letters James had written, which are also entered into evidence. The state stance, whether or not Walborn actually received the letter, is beside the point. What matters is the attempt. And the judge agreed, at least enough to let the jury decide. She ruled that it is up to the jury to determine whether the letter's failure to reach its destination disqualifies it from being a real attempt at solicitation. But in her view, there was sufficient evidence for the state to meet its burden, at least enough to send count 4 to the jury. So, motion denied. All 6 counts will move forward, and then we moved into jury instructions. And here's the basics of what you need to know. The defense proposed that jurors be given the option to consider lesser included offenses, specifically manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. The prosecution did not object. That means jurors won't just be deciding if James Craig is guilty of first-degree murder. They'll also be given other off-ramps. Honestly, it's a strategic move and one that could change everything. But here's the thing. They split the manslaughter lesser from murder and made that a 7th count. So the jurors will get to decide on that once they begin deliberating, and it won't just be a lesser. So tomorrow is a big day. Closing argument. The attorneys will bring any corrections to the jury instructions in the morning. The court will go over them. Each side will be given a 90-minute limit for their closing statement, which actually is a long time. And then the jury will begin deliberating. So before deliberations, what do you make of all of the evidence we have heard so far? I know that most of us probably feel strongly that James is likely guilty. But I have to admit, I was caught off guard by the defense's cross-examination of Detective Olson today. Could the fact that investigators chose not to collect or search Angela's iPad or any of the family's laptop suggest to the jury that she might have looked up poisons herself? Or at the very least, does that decision plant enough reasonable doubt to support James's version of events? The number of things investigators chose to leave behind is genuinely surprising. It was surprising to me. But will that be enough to sway the jury or even just one juror, especially considering James's defense chose not to call any witnesses of their own, not even James himself? We will find out. And whatever the jury decides, because I don't know, I never, ever get a prediction for a jury right. This is Lauren talking right now. So that was the end of court today. And tomorrow, again, is a big day, closing arguments. And while we don't know whether or not the jury will find James Craig guilty of first-degree murder or manslaughter or whatever the case, I'm going to say one thing that is certain, at least to me, in my opinion, and in Angela's own words in her journal. that James Craig was an abusive husband, emotional abuse. Angela Craig said she felt it. She felt abused. And I'm going to share something a little bit personal because at Hidden True Crime, we pick cases that matter to us, where we believe that we can provide value to covering them. And yes, this case was important because I knew there were no cameras in the courtroom, and I believe in transparency. And yes, I wanted to cover this because I want justice for Angela Craig, or hope for justice, whatever that looks like. That's to be determined. But it's also personal to me, and I don't always share this, but I want to share it now, that it's not always something I talk about, but I actually have written a book, and the book is called Escaping Emotional Abuse. And it's a memoir of sort, and it's not a book that I always share, and it's not something I talk about unless it is relevant. And this case has struck a chord with me. And I want to share that if anybody is writing journal entries like Angela Craig, saying that it's a roller coaster, saying that they feel abused, saying that they're confused, saying that they don't know how to move forward. I have felt some of those things myself. And I wish that there had been a book. And so I wrote a memoir of sorts for anyone that might be in this situation. And I want you to know that other people have felt those things too. And I wish that Angela had been able to speak to more people beyond her journal. And I know she did. And I know she had her sister Tony. And I know she had people that she tried to open up to. But it's so confusing when you're in a situation like that. It's so confusing. The roller coaster is so real. So whatever the jury decides tomorrow, and whether or not James Craig will be found guilty of first-degree murder or manslaughter or whatever the case, I want to suggest that one thing is that there was emotional abuse. Whether or not he's guilty of those things, I do see an emotionally abusive marriage, and Angela Craig deserves so much more. And if anybody needs help, and if anybody needs some sort of guidance, or if this book could help someone, I just want you to know it's there, and I will share the link. And that's all. I just want to share that. And I won't share that again, but yeah. So we will be back tomorrow. Closing arguments. Very big deal. This was predicted to last 3 weeks, this trial. It will be a little bit shorter. They have gone through witnesses a lot faster than anticipated. I wish that I could be there for closing statements. I was there the first full week, but I am with my family where I need to be. But I will be watching every second of court tomorrow and bringing you the very latest so we can continue to stay up to date with justice.